Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, I am here to deliver the 11th lecture of the course Public Administration, and I am sure that now you are very fond of having the summary of the previous lecture, so I will not go against my habit, and it is good to start with the previous summary so that the things are linked. If you remember, in the previous lecture we were talking about the local government's gradual improvements over the 66th year of Pakistan, and we started from well before the inception of Pakistan, and after that we studied the Ayub Khan Daur era and then the Ziaul Haq era. So we were still in the half and the middle of the Zia era, and we were talking about how he tried to establish local governments. One thing that should be remembered categorically, that in our throughout history, the non-representative or the military dictator were so keen to establish the local government. One reason for that, it was required for them to prove their legitimacy because they were not the elected representative of the nations. So they made their own mechanism. We may criticize, but one thing is on the board, that at least they give some initiative that unfortunately our representative governments are unable to take up to the required level that should be taken. How Ayub Khan started? Ayub Khan gave the system of presidential form of government, and he introduced the basic democrats, and if you remember, there were 80,000 elected members through basic democracies, and that was the total electoral college for the provincials, the centrals and the presidential election. So after that, Zia went to, when he took over on 5th July 1977, after removing the elected government of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, he also had to feel that he needs some legitimacy. In 1979, he promulgated an ordinance that is called the Local Government Ordinance. In this ordinance, he also tried to empower the provincial the local governments, so that the people could elect their representative on their own, and some of the powers were handed over to the local governments. This process continues, and in 1985 there was general elections of the provincial assemblies and the national assemblies on the non-party basis. After this, the inception of the assemblies, there was a notorious clause of the article, that was the 8th Amendment. 8th Amendment was indirectly the rule of the power of the military on the elected government. So throughout this time, we saw that although there was a mechanism and there was establishment of the local government, one thing that was totally matching with the pre-partition time or the British India, that all the British as well as the military dictator, they were keen to ensure that the true authority remains with them in the center. So we can say that up to some extent this was the drama, not based it was not based on the sincerity that the local people should be empowered, but it was based on that it should be shown to the people that there is a democratic system and all the power still lies with the centers, and that was the president at that time. We will continue our discussion of Zia era. After this, that we will discuss the Musharraf local government ordinance, that is the most famous and is now in function, and we will see that then we will make a bit comparison of this or that. One comparison between Zia era and the Ayub era is that the Ayub era tried to was biased towards the rural population, and the rural population was much prosperous through these democracies. But in Zia era today we will also see that he tried to build a middle class that was ultimately his power. So so we discuss this in now detail. The urban-rural divide, due to the ordinances or the local government, there was rural-urban divide. Yesterday we saw for this. In local government was partly a response to social demographic changes. There was significant social demographic changes from in the 80s and then particularly in the 80s. What was this? There was a huge inflow of remittances, and the people, among other reasons, started to move towards the cities to have their children educated due to many other facilities like health and the electricity and many more facilities. So there was some of the geographical change, not the geographical, socio-geographical change, that the people were traveling from villages to the cities, and there were shanty towns around the cities, and it can be said that the more migration pressure was on the big cities like Lahore, Karachi, Faisalabad, Peshawar, Quetta, and many other cities. So what this rural-urban divide was not only the consequence of Zia's mechanism of local government, but it also has some demographic roots in the history. Moreover, Zia attempted to accommodate strong urban middle class political mobilizations. If you remember, when the Bhutto was in the last days of his government, there were huge protests against the Bhutto government on the basis of that there was malpractices in the election, that the election was not free, and many very large protests were being led by the opposition leader, that the Pakistan National Alliance. So in the removal of Bhutto, the protest came from the cities. So Zia was psychologically obliged towards the urban middle class who took part against the regime of Bhutto, supported indirectly by the Ziaul Haq or the military at that time. So this was another reason that Zia, as compared to the Ayub Khan, Zia was inclined or biased towards the urban population, and particularly the middle class that took part against the agitation of the last days of the Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. Historical evidence suggests that Zia sought to accommodate the interest of the urban middle class. If we see and if we look at the expenditure and the revenue mechanism of the local government of the Ziaul Haq, we come to know that he tried his best to oblige and accommodate this urban middle class. And since that, this urban middle class has increased significantly after the in the era of Ziaul Haq. Who had formed, how he tried to accommodate this, who had formed the core of the anti-PNA movement. Why they were granted so obliged? The reason was crystal clear, that the PNA, Pakistan National Alliance, that was the alliance against the Bhutto, and that was totally supported by these urban middle class. There was not much support from the rural areas. Most support came from the urban areas, and that's why Zia was able to oblige these people. These changes helped consolidate urban political parties such as the MQM in Sindh. What happened as the result of Zia's inclination towards the urban middle class, some new parties emerged on the scenes of Pakistan political landscape. One of the biggest party was the Muttahida Muhajir Qawmi movement at that time, but now MQM means Muttahida Qawmi movement, but in the beginning MQM stood for Muhajir Qawmi movement. So this was in the Sindh and particularly in the Karachi area. This was against a reaction from the Zia, because Zia knew that the People Party has a strong castle in the Sindh, and he wanted to bring an alternate or opponent against the People Party into the system, and he encouraged the parties. That was the Muhajir Qawmi movement. So up till that Zia time we will call it Muhajir Qawmi movement, and after that I will call it the Muttahida Qawmi movement. And in Punjab, if you see, the Nawaz Sharif faction of the Muslim League appeared. Nawaz Sharif was not a politician by hierarchy or politician by forefathers. He immediately caught the attention of Ziaul Haq, and then he made progress by leaps and bounds, and in a few years very quickly he became the chief minister of Punjab, and ultimately now you can see, fortunately he has this is the third term for him as a prime minister. So in 1980 a person appeared on the scene, and he became the prime minister of Pakistan just after 12 years in 1990. So this was the results of the बसात जो बिछाई थी ज़ियाउल हक ने, उसके नतीजे में ये जो है वो सारी सिचुएशन जो है वो सामने आ रही थी. The accommodation of urban middle class interest continued. Zia did not stop here by making some of the political parties, but his beneficiaries were the urban middle class, and one way or the other they were being compensated, or they, in other words it will be better if I use that they were preferred over the urban rural class. There was a steady consolidation of Punjab's urban middle class vote in favor of Nawaz Sharif Muslim League. Now what was Zia's purpose? Zia's purpose was to build a party that could counterattack the Pakistan People's Party. At that time People Party was one of the powerful, and you can say it dominated the whole landscape of the West Pakistan. There was no other party of that caliber. So the Zia, that was the military dictator, definitely he had to the policy of the divide and rule. So he decided to bring a new party, and Nawaz Sharif was one of his best choice. So how he did this? He all the beneficiaries of the local governments were the middle class, and this middle class ultimately transformed their vote towards the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz. At that time it was not Nawaz, but later on it became the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz. The political, if you see, we are still in this era, the political and economic consolidation which counterbalanced rural Punjab's numerical majority. Definitely the most population was residing and is residing in rural areas of Pakistan. Particularly in Punjab there is more rural base, and what happened that the focus that the power of the People Party from the rural areas was counterattacked by this urban middle class by giving them the economic consolidation and political consolidation in the shape of a new party that was led on later stage, that was led by Mr. Nawaz Sharif. However, the increasing political importance of urban middle class group was considerably offset by the revival of elected assemblies in 1985. This all was happening on the basis of the local government, but there was a huge setback to the urban middle class when there were general non-party elections and the provincials and the National Assembly appeared on the scenes of Pakistan after almost 10 years of martial law. So in 1985, when these assemblies appeared, definitely the focus was now on the provincial and the central level, and that was spoon-feeding urban population that was now not getting as benefit, because the dictator has shared to some extent some of his power to the provincial and the central government, whichever represented rural politicians in the provincial and federal parliaments. What happens in those assemblies? Most of the politicians were the feudals, and they have background from the rural areas. So as a member comes from the rural elite, definitely he will be working for the welfare of the rural. So at that stage, 1985 was the turning point of the history of Pakistan. That was the counterbalancing of this urban middle class. From 1979 to up to 1985, there were heydays for the urban middle class, and the rural class went in the dark, or went in the out of the scene to some extent. But in 1985 elections, there was a rebound of the rural population, not due to their any own effort or political struggle, but it was the 1985 election that gave an opportunity to the feudals to become to the parliament. One thing should be crystal clear, that only those people were allowed to enter into the assemblies that have no affiliation with the Pakistan People's Party. So the elections were marred by this restrictions. Underground, even the people who were elected, they were forced to give up their affiliation with the party that was the Pakistan People's Party. Local government reforms, however, this rural dominance of the provincial and national political tier is a constant theme. We can't discuss this, that how this happened or how that happened. There are seesaw situation between the rural and the urban class preferences. Some governments give more opportunities, creates more opportunities for the rural, and the other governments may have more inclined towards the urban population. If you see and listen many of the newspaper, you will come to know the per capita expenditure on the urban middle class that is residing in the cities is much more higher than a person living in the rural areas. All the facilities, all the wealth index shows that there is more per capita income being spent on this political and that urban middle class as compared to the rural middle class. So it is a constant theme that we at this stage we can't say that which is the dominating, but to some extent at least it can be said that on some occasion the balance was in favor of the rural population, and on the other time of the history it was kinked towards the urban population. Therefore, analyzing changing urban-rural bias is only really meaningful at the local level. So this is a very long story. We just keep it here that it is a live phenomena. It still exists, and it is existing since the history of Pakistan, even before the inception of Pakistan, pre-British India, British India, and such things. But we just conclude here that there is a gap, there has been a gap between the urban and the rural middle class. Evolution of the local government structure 1985-1999. Now, the most critical era of the Zia period is over, because at least although there was लूली लंगड़ी जो है वो जमहूरियत थी, however there was a democratic government in after the election of 1985 when there was Junejo as the prime minister. So then we will see from 85 to 99 what happened to the local government. The revival of elected provincial and national governments in 1985 reinforced the localization. They tried these. Now these were the assemblies, the provincial and the central assemblies. They tried to reinforce the localization. Definitely, when there is a democratic government, it feels happy to address the depressed segments of the society. So this happened. This government that was led by the Junejo, Muhammad Khan Junejo, they tried their best to localize the system. The dominance of these revived assemblies by local bodies politicians helped transplant the culture of local body politics to the provincial and national levels. What happened at this time? The dominance of these revived assemblies by local bodies politicians, many of the politicians that were active at the local level, they were able to enter into the provincial and the national assemblies. They helped transplant the culture of local body politics. Definitely they were from there. They tried to help transplant those systems to the local and to the provincial and the national levels. What the message is being conveyed here, that as the election completed, new government came into being, that was the democratic government. The most of the critical thing is that many of the person who were already working at local governments, they were well-known politicians at the local government, they were able to enter to the provincial and the central assemblies. So as they were from the local base, so they tried to transplant the same culture into the provincial and the central assemblies. This tendency was reinforced by the non-party nature of 1985 assemblies and governments. So it was 1985 was a non-party election, so this style continued. Elected government ministers began to use development funds to increase their individual chances of re-election. Definitely, when, as I said in previous lecture, that there was high corruption in the last days of Ayub Khan and the era of Zia, because they allow corruption deliberately so that the people do not see towards them, and that whole focus remains on some other things rather than on the non-representation of the government, that they are the military dictator. So they are very clever by nature, and they know how to divide and rule and how to address and create the problem when there is any focus towards their own legitimacy. So what happened there, the minister were given enough funds without any accountability, but definitely if a minister was going against the military, he was threatened by the accountability. So accountability was only for those persons who were not working on the will of the government. So in this situation, what happened, that when the minister were allotted enough funds, they tried to spend those funds to ensure their re-election, because everyone wants his or her re-election. Moreover, now there was the role of personalization and individualism. If you see, very individual powerful members and the personalization of this political system appeared in this era of 1985 to 1998. From 1985 to 1988, there was indirectly a military role, because president was still the non-elected member. So he tried his best to give more opportunities to the people that were strong enough, but they have no party affiliation, particularly with the out of the scene Pakistan People's Party. So the Biradarism, the individualism, the personalization of this political system was one of the gifts awarded by the military ruler Ziaul Haq. Moreover, this personalization of politics did not reverse the revival of party-based election in 1988. In 1988, fortunately, there was election. Unfortunately, there was a mishap to the C-130 when it was just on its way from Bahawalpur to Islamabad, carrying many of the high-rank military officers of Pakistan Army, and unfortunately it crashed on August 1988, and soon after that there was the election. Although Zia has already announced the election, but there was no guarantee that he was serious to hold the election, because many times he promised and he did not hold the election. So in 1988 the situation did not reverse, because there was now very hue and cry, and there was very short time for the parties to go into the election. Now these election was party-led elections, and one of the party was the Pakistan Muslim League, and the other one of the major party was Pakistan People's Party. So despite that 1988 there was party elections, the revival of the local government could not be seen, because again I would like to repeat that the military dictator, the non-representatives, are more interested in local government to have their legitimacy. But when the political government or the elected government come into force, before election they make claim that they will hold the local body election, but as they assume the power, they forget about, and they just become busy in their provincial and the central setup. The persistence of this tendency is partly an outcome of weakening party organization. Zia hammered the party systems over the 11 years. There was much reshuffling of the parties. People Party was given tough time, and the other parties were giving some encouragement, like the Muttahida Qawmi Movement and the Pakistan Muslim League. So these parties has no roots into the public, so there was weakening organization of the parties, and ultimately due to this reason there was no serious effort on the part of political government to introduce some special kind of local government system. Party tickets were given individual bargaining between powerful local brokers and party leaders. Rather than the collective wisdom, there was now a new start of the era, because the party has no roots into the system, because it was just developed after the 11 years of the dictatorship. So what was happening in how the people get the party tickets? Exceptions are always there. The people get the party ticket on the basis of the bargaining between the candidate and the political leader, and there was some, the role of the money also, and the collective wisdom that the party affiliation, the merit was totally ignored. Not only the Pakistan People's Party, not only the Pakistan Muslim League, it was ignored in all the parties categorically. Collective decision making within the political party organization was weakened, because there was no roots of any of the party except the Pakistan People's Party. There was very organization wing. पार्टी के अपने इलेक्शन नहीं हो रहे थे, पीपल्स पार्टी के भी नहीं हुए थे आज तक, बड़ी मुश्किल से जो है. Now the party have conducted their inter-party elections, and you have seen that how drama this was, the inter-party the election. Furthermore, the absence of political linkage between different tiers of government created tension between provincial and local politicians. This was very dangerous for the political landscape of Pakistan. What happened? That on the center, when there was the non-representative government, but on the local level there were the representative government, that the local government. So how it was possible to be coordinated between them and that? However, up to 1988, leaving the discussion behind, going further, what happened there, that as there was not a well-designed mechanism between the provincial, the central and the local government, so there was the tussles of use of power, use of resources, use of accountability. accountability, use of authority, many problems were there, and the local governments were being handcuffed on the part of the provincial and the central government, not in the dictatorship but also in the political regime after the 1988. This is not the fault of the political parties totally, but it was done previously, because in the center there was military, on the local, on the grassroots level there was the local parties. So how it is possible that on the lower tier there is the elected government and on the higher tier there is the non-elected government? So that's why there was not a well-managed, well-framed, well-designed mechanism, and as the political parties resumed the power, then there was the tussle, because now there were three tiers: the local government tiers, the provincial tiers and the central tiers. Within the local system, local tiers, there was the mechanism, but the interlinkage, the integration of the provincial and the central government with the local government was not. That created much problems at the later stages. This competition, now there was a competition between the local, the provincial and the central government. This competition had real consequences, as MPAs, members of provincial assemblies, and MNAs, members of the national assemblies, began to progressively take over functions performed by locally elected representatives. What happened there? When there is not a well-defined mechanism, who gets the benefit? The powerful gets the benefit. If I am the weaker, you are the powerful. If the frame of reference is given, the boundary lines are given, I am safe. But if there is no boundary, you will be dominating me, and definitely you have the power, you have the resources to interfere in my domain. The same happened because the local governments were weak, and now there were the provincial assemblies and the national assemblies. The MPAs, the MNAs, they wanted to be re-elected. So how they behaved? They behaved in such a way that they did not support the local governments, and they tried to overtake their authorities, their resources, their mechanism to show people that they are more careful for the people. So there was a tussle inside the political government, inside the system. So when there was a tussle, the bureaucracy was enjoying. You can see from 1979-85, or you can say up to further, there was such a mechanism that the bureaucracy never came under the accountability, because the political governments were weak and the system was going with breaks, with fits and start. This trend was reinforced by various prime ministers, chief minister, special development program. So what then it created the problems for the real executive, the chief ministers and the prime ministers. So how they tried? Now they tried to intervene into the systems by creating special development programs, because now it was clear that the MPAs and the MNAs, if you go to the rural areas, you can see that they spent money, MPAs, the MNAs, on those areas. That was the totally a small number of people were getting benefit from this, but that small number of people was very powerful because they have votes in the locality, and definitely these people were giving money, giving resources, giving facilities to those, because they wanted themselves to be elected and they wanted their support. So the chief ministers and prime minister launched the programs for the social welfare of the people, though it was again done through the provincial and the national assembly members. However, there was some other mechanism that the rural and the rural or the grassroots population was directly beneficiary of this, leaving the matter of consumption corruption behind. Moreover, the concentration of revenues went in the hands of federal and provincial government. ये सबसे बड़ा मसला होता है. आप किसी को इख्तियारात दे देते हैं, पैसे कोई नहीं देते. This is a very stupid way to control the system, and the system never runs. It creates many problems for all the tiers of the government. So it had been happening in the history of Pakistan that even the Ayub Khan given powers to the local government, Zia gave power to the local government, and even Musharraf gave powers to the local government. But ultimately you will see with the varying degree the financial and the budgetary powers were ultimately on the hands of the higher tiers. So when you have to see the provincial and the central governments for funds, what you will be doing? Definitely you will be on the approval or on the payroll of those provincial and the federal government. So that this budgetary not decentralization of the budgetary and the financial system, it remained a very, very significant hurdle in the true implication of the local governments. Finally, this tension between provincial and this should be 99. Finally, this tension between provincial and local tiers resulted in the suspension of local bodies between 1993 and 1998. बहुत ज़्यादा ड्रामा हुआ, कोई पता नहीं चल रहा था, कोई सुधाई नहीं दे रहा था कि who is the responsible, who has to be responsible for this or that. So what happened there? Ultimately, the political government has to suspend this local body system, and they did not try to reinforce them. They did not conduct or hold the election and local government elections, and they were so fed up of this. There was much tussles. You can't imagine that up to this level, because there was no perfect mechanism. This was the interjuncture of the action, no separate. If this is the local government, if this is the provincial government, this is the situation, then definitely have different parts. Now this was interconnected. Both were pulling the cake on their sides, but definitely the powerful gets the more lion's share. So the provincial and the central governments were getting the lion's share from this, and ultimately leaving the local government helpless and the hopeless for this. So in 1993, what we can say, from 1988 to 1999, 11 years for Prime Minister. 2-time Benazir, 2-time Nawaz Sharif. These were the totally elected government, although there were some non-transparency issue of the election, yet these were the elected representative, and it was supposed and assumed that they will immediately pay their attention towards the local governments, but they were unable to pay their attention, focus the more critical issue of the local governments, and they continued in that way. And ultimately what happened, the local government or the local bodies were suspended, not by the dictators. If it was done by the dictators, there was not surprising. It was being done by the political government. And as before, in the period immediately following independence, somewhat paradoxically, फिर पैराडॉक्सिक जो है वो इसमें आ गई कि इसमें फिर एक जो है वो पजल जो है वो सामने आ गई. What happened that the restricted government and the local government and the powerful central government, same was happening just after the inception of Pakistan. It was democratic forces at the provincial and the higher levels that pushed for a retrenchment of local government. ये एक बड़ी retrenchment mean limit. This is very, very surprising that these were the democratic forces, not the dictator forces, not the non-representative forces at the provincial and the higher level that pushed for return. इन्होंने कहा जी local government को जो है वो कर्ब कर दिया जाए. This was the most teasing point in the history of Pakistan, that the people who were responsible for holding and empowering the local government, they were saying that the role of the local government should be retrenched. Why they were doing so? Definitely they wanted to be more powerful as compared to the local. So this was the era of the MPAs, the MNAs. There was horse trading in the history of Pakistan from 88 to 99. Many, you can say the Lotus terminology, horse trading, घोड़े, बकरे, were all used for this, and this was the reason that everyone wanted to be MP or MNA or wanted to go into in power party so that he could get many of the funds. The corruption was at its peak, and no one knows that what going to be happens. And you know what, in such a situation what happens, we will see that is the ultimate result of this. What is the conclusion of this, our whole discussion? Now we can say it up to 99. Revival of elected political government in 1988 did not reverse the earlier trend towards the centralization. इससे पहले तो सेंट्रलाइजेशन थी ही थी इक़्तिदार में जो है starting from the 1947 to 1985. It was assumed, it was guessed, it was predicted that as the political forces will come into power, they will reinforce the local government, but that did not happen. So what we conclude, that only the non-representative government cannot be held responsible for this. Even the political governments are more had made more crime as compared to the earlier one, because it was their duty, their function to conduct the local elections to empower the local people. So after 1988 there was hope, but that was ended in smoke. There was not a significant change in the scenario or the local government landscape of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. To concentrate political control in the central executive was strengthened by a number of factors. कई फैक्टर थे जो कि ये इस बात को इंश्योर कर रहे थे that there should be the centralization of the power in the center, because the bureaucracy, the military, although from 1988 to 1999, military or the establishment went behind the scene, but still it was playing with the politician. It was creating parties, it was making people, putting people to the accountable, threatening the people, giving money to the people to come into some under specific flag. There are many stories, definitely you are aware of for this. So due to these many factors, the Prime Minister was convinced, वो खुद बेचारा नहीं चाहता था, but he was persuaded that his survival is only if he has more powers in the center. That is never true. The more powers to the provincial units, the more powerful is the federal government, because federal government is on the basis of the province. If provinces are happy, definitely the federal government has no problem. Primary among them, among all these factors, what was the core? Them was one party's lack of dominance in electoral politics at both the center and at the level of the provinces. The kingmakers of the political landscape from 88 to 99, they ensured that no party comes into power with full power except the 1996 election. So what this way, one of the centralizations of the power in the system was that in the center there was different government, and in the provinces there was another different government. For example, when the PMLN was in the power in the center, the Sindh and the other provinces, they were not the party of the Pakistan Muslim League, and in 1996 there was definitely a big difference of this. So जब किंग मेकर इस बात को इंश्योर कर रहे थे कि कोई पार्टी ज़्यादा जो है वो पावरफुल ना हो जाए, so this was one of the fear that each political leader thought that the central should be powerful. Centralization of the political power was also seen as a way of redressing the indirect control. यही बात जो मैंने अभी की, that the centralization of the power was the desires of the real kingmaker of Pakistan. Because if the rural or the local governments are powerful, then the kingmakers have no power in the center. So what they used, first they tried to concentrate the power into the center, and then they were sitting behind the scene and they were pulling the rings and the wings of the political government, and they were dictating in any of the way they wanted for that things. So apart from the previous one that was here, that there was not a one party dominance all over the country. One was this reason for the more centralization of the authority in the center, and the other was that the kingmakers want to have their hold through indirect ways. And finally, the frequent exercise of dissolution powers by various presidents shortened the time horizons of the political leadership. So what this means, the other was the frequent exercise of dissolution powers by various presidents. They shortened the horizons of the political leadership. They never allowed any of the political to complete their term. And this created added incentive for the centralization of budgetary funds. And now every prime minister wanted more power, particularly the budgetary powers, so that he has some discretionary power wherever he goes into the country. He could deliver many of the resources to that. अपने जलसों में जाते, ऐलान करते और इन सब चीज़ों के लिए. As a result of these factors, expenditure functions continue to be centralized. और कुछ होगा, इख्तियारात जो है वो मिले, but what happened, ultimately the expenditure, or you can say simply the budgetary functions were centralized. The powers were not given to the provinces. The new devolution of power plan, before going to the new devolution plan of the Musharraf, very famous for this. We have to give enough time to study this because it was much different from the previous one. I would like to have 1 minute's summary of the previous devolution plans. The plan started from the Ayub's basic democracies, then Zia, and then we will discuss the devolution plan of Musharraf. One thing has been common between all these devolution plan, that the more power remains with the center, and the local bodies were not given any much powers. Particularly the budgetary powers, the expenditure and the revenue powers were never imparted on to these local governments. So now coming to the new devolution of power plan, current decentralization process introduced as the devolution of power. And you know, on the 12th October 1998, General Musharraf took over the sent the political government of Nawaz Sharif to jails, and he took over as a chief executive of Pakistan, and he was also a military ruler, and he ruled till 2008. So he also introduced devolution of power. So immediate my question is, whenever there is the start of the military regime, why there is also a discussion of the local government? And you know that they want their legitimacy because they have no roots into the grassroots level. So they want to show the people that they are the elected member. Plan by General Musharraf in January 2008 and implemented after a series of local government election that ended by September 2001. This plan was given by General Pervez Musharraf in 2000, and after that the election it was a gradual process, so the election continues till the September 2001. So it means almost quarter to 2 years took of this devolutions of the power. However, in some extent we will see that this was a bit different and much better as compared to the other. Much better only I am saying, you may have different idea from this one, because it in one way it was true. We will see at later stage that the powers were given to the true representative of the electoral, and the bureaucracy was held responsible before the district governments. And we see what was this plan. There are several aspects of the reform that are worth highlighting. The reforms from the Musharraf, no doubt every Pakistani, every educated Pakistani are the proponent of democracy. He is against the dictators. But it doesn't mean that the dictator has no single good attributes. Definitely some of their works were good that should be appreciated, and we will keep on doing this, because the one of the good thing from the Ayub was that he introduced the system of basic democracies, rural bias, positive rural bias. When the Zia came, the urban middle class went up, and now we will see that in the Musharraf regime what happened. The first highlight, or the first, in addition to devolving administrative, सबने administrative power दे दी थी elected members को, but the ultimate power remained with the democracy. So in the Musharraf or the new devolution plan, what happened that in this not only the administrative, first in addition to devolving administrative and expenditure responsibility to local government, the centralization involved changes in the administrative level of decision making. Let me clear, I just read out this, you may not understand. What happened here? Administrative control भी दिया गया, budgetary control भी जो है वो दिया गया, but the most important thing is that the decision maker authority were also the elected representative, not the bureaucracy. In the previous, all the local government ordinances or the local government mechanism or framework, you can see that this was only the administrative shift, but the ultimate decision maker were the bureaucracies like the deputy commissioner and whatsoever. But in this plan, one of the salient feature is that not only the administrative powers were transferred, not only the revenue were transferred, but also there was the decision making authority was also given to the elected member. That was a very good scene. The accountability of decision-making authority, political or bureaucratic. One more thing was being added, that the accountability was in process of both the bureaucratic as well as the political elected member, and they were responsible before the elected members, not any kind of the bureaucracy. इससे पहले क्या होता था कि elected member were responsible before the bureaucracy for their deeds, but this system was totally changed, and this was not the situation now, and administrative level of making. Secondly, this was the one of the salient feature. क्या थी जी salient feature? Simply administrative power also shifted, budgetary power shifted, and the most importantly that has been missing throughout the history of Pakistan, that the policy making system was also handed over to the local government. Secondly, what happened, the decentralization process was not uniform across all functions. This was, you may say that this was is merit, or you may take it as a demerit. It is a debatable. What this thing, that there was no uniform system, not only across the departments but within the department also. What this means, that the process was not uniform across the function. In different situations, different functionaries were given different powers. It was heterogeneous. Heterogeneous means not homogeneous, it was not uniform. In its extent, not only across different administrative departments, but often also across different services within a department. ये इसकी जो है वो ज़्यादा ही हैरत अंगेज और जो है वो over ambitious, or you can say the interesting thing is that it was heterogeneous. If something is heterogeneous across department, it is easily understandable. But this was, in delivering the powers, it was also heterogeneous within the provision of the service, even within one of the department. So this was, again I would like to say, it could be the benefit of the merit of this or disadvantage of this. And finally, the reform took place fairly rapidly when no provincial and national elected government were in power. ये भी एक है कि ये जो है वो fairly to some extent it went fairly rapidly, बड़ी तेजी से इस पे काम हुआ. और किस सूरत में काम हुआ? When at the higher level there was no elected government neither in the province nor in the center, and the army was holding the total control through its representative or the non-political actors, that you can say the governors and whatsoever. So these are the three highlights of the salient features of the new devolution plan. If I want to say the overview of this plan, that is the new plan, the devolution process substantially restructured the sub-provincial, district and below government structure. Yes, this government felt that there is a gap between the local government and the provincial or the central government. So they recognize this fact. Besides it is more interesting that although at the provincial and the central level there were no government, but this government recognized that there is lack of integration between the local government and the provincial and the central government. It means something was moving in their mind that they are going to conduct election for the provincial and the national assemblies, and they did, and definitely as a result there was the Prime Minister of Zafrullah Jamali, Shujaat Hussain and the Shaukat Aziz. These were for the same era, but fortunately or unfortunately the president was the same, that was the Musharraf. So they recognized this fact, whereas previously locally elected governments did exist at this level, their powers were fairly limited. यहाँ पावर भी इनको जो है वो खासी दे दी गई, although these exist previously, but the more powers were still lies with the center, not with the local governments. Most of the functions were carried out by provincial line departments. Previously क्या हो रहा था? Many of the functions were done by the provincial departments, and the local government were not allowed a bureaucratic tier that did not report directly to provincial elected representative. So what this means, कैसे ये system चल रहा था? The bureaucrats were running the local governments and they were not responsible to appear before the provincially elected representative in any of their responsibility or in any of their jurisdiction. This is an overview, and we will keep on discussing and studying different aspects of this. This is the more important, and still the situation is not clear that how the new local elections are being convened. Although the scenario is much clear, but still the delimitation, the functionings, one thing is more clear, that they are being done on the party basis. So these things are clear. We will keep on discussing, and I think it is a time to have a quick summary of today's lecture. If you remember, we started from today the Zia's era of local government, and we saw that Zia redefined, restructured the local governments. Some of the powers were given, but one thing is that the focus was shifted from rural to the urban middle class. And you know what was the reason for this? The reason was simply that most of the opponent against the People Party came from the urban middle class. In the 1985 election, there was much expectation from the governments that it will address the local governments, particularly the elections of 1988. The people were thinking that the new elected government will bounce back and give their keen intention towards the local government. That did not happen, and there was much tussle between the local government and the MPAs and the MNAs. The reason was that when these local government ordinance or local government bodies were framed, there were no elected government in the central and the provincial level, and there was disintegration, no pure mechanism that could link one in these with one another. So what happened, one tragic incident of the history of Pakistan happened when the political government on their own will, they suspended the local government bodies, and the whole power was against concentrated into the provincial and the central level. The other thing is when the new devolution plan came from the Musharraf when he took over in 1999 from Nawaz Sharif. He introduced his plan in 2000 that was totally materialized in September 2001. It was some significant change from the different one. How it was different from the previous one? One of the salient feature of this, not only the administrative powers were given, not only the budgetary power were given to the local government, but they were also given the policy making decision. For the first time in the history of Pakistan, it happened that the bureaucracy was responsible before the elected government under this the framework that was designed by the Musharraf or his companions. One other thing for this Musharraf era is that they tried to interlink the loopholes, or they tried to plug the loopholes that were existing between the local governments and the provincial and the central government, due to which there were many of the problems over the previous year. So they introduced their own system that worked up to some level. It is a debatable thing, it could be criticized, but one thing should be crystal clear even up to this level, that starting from pre-British to British India, post-Pakistan independence and all this, that every government, even the political government, tried their best in one way or the other to keep more and more powers and resource powerhouse in the central to facilitate them. That was not the true perception, and to which they have to pay the heavy price of this, particularly in the lower, in the less developed areas of the rural population of all the provinces. So thank you very much for your keen intention. Now you have become the politicians. Now you know that what happened over the years, and now you can assess that what was the true purpose and what was the reality of this. So thank you very much. See you in the next lecture. Goodbye and Allah Hafiz.